Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. I'm home, back in my element. It feels good. Feels great. We're going to jump into everything that happened on verdict day and before. I'm going to give you guys a rundown of my experience there. It's all unique to each of us, I think. But music fact of the day, Syd Barrett, who is one of the founding members of Pink Floyd, as we know, left the band. He was suffering with mental illness. So the last time the band saw Syd Barrett, he just kind of walked into the recording studio where they were. His head was shaven. He was slightly overweight, and he was just unrecognizable to his former bandmates, including his childhood friend Roger Waters was moved to tears when he realized this was his old friend Syd Barrett. So Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which is one of my absolute favorite songs by Pink Floyd, was a letter to Barrett and his light innocence, delusions, and legacy with the band. I'm going to have to jam out to that tonight. All right. So the past 6 weeks, man, it is surreal. It will never not be surreal to me to cover a case from a distance and have the ability to go sit in a trial for 6 weeks, to be in the room with somebody who is accused and now convicted of doing such evil things. There's just something to it. Now, she would look over at me and smile at times, and it was bizarre. It was very weird. The jury, man, I have to say, I was so worried about incompetence because it's not unheard of that defendants can be incompetent for years at some time. The kidnapper in the Elizabeth Smart case, he was incompetent for 8 years or so, or close to it, before he ever saw a courtroom to face these charges. And I had a big fear this could be the norm with her. And we know towards the end of last year, we had that little scare where she was reevaluated and deemed to be competent, thank goodness. And I'm really honestly just shocked that this trial started and ended, because I was just waiting on a shoe to drop. But we got there. I can't say enough about this jury. And it kind of goes back to the incompetence and the delays. I'm a firm believer in fate, and things happen for a reason. And the 10 weeks she was incompetent was not a good time for those of us who have followed this trial. But, I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And these delays that we've had, it led us right to this jury that I believe wholeheartedly did not know much about this case, judging their reactions over the past 6 weeks. And they came back with the verdict that we all thought it should be: guilty on all charges. And also, one thing to note, the day of the verdict, 5 of the 6 alternates came back and watched. Now, they were sitting behind Lori, kind of facing the jury on the opposite side of the room, but you could tell they wanted to see this through. It's very disappointing to sit in a case, I'm sure, for 6 weeks and not be chosen to deliberate, but their participation was just as important as anybody else's, because they could have been a juror that sat there and decided her fate, and every single one of them paid attention the entire time. Props to this jury. I don't think any of them have spoken out. If you guys know one of the jurors, please have them reach out to me. They can have an open forum here and tell their story. We can get them on Law and Crime, or both, because Law and Crime is the reason I was able to go out to that trial for 6 weeks. I could not have done it on my own. So I just want to thank them for trusting me, not only with this case that is so dear to my heart, but also the Murdaugh trial. And I've learned so much doing these live things with them, and I hope to do some more in the future. I'm hoping to go back for sentencing, so I'll keep you posted on that. That's going to be anywhere from 2 to 3 months. They have to do a pre-sentencing investigation with her. Once she's processed into that DOC, she could be extradited to Arizona to face charges not only for Charles Vallow, but the date that Brandon Boudreaux was shot at was included in that press release. So a lot of people ask me, why did Melanice not testify? And we just don't know. We know that the prosecution chose not to call her. That could be for a million reasons, and I could speculate as to why. I could say maybe just emotionally, they didn't think she could handle it. Or is it one of those things where maybe that could mess up Arizona? Because we don't have charges yet for Brandon, and it's yet to be seen, besides what seems like Lori, who's going to be charged in that. Who knows? But she wasn't in contempt. She wasn't in trouble, and she left. Deliberations, once they sent that jury back, I get very, very nervous. I get super nervous thinking about what if. We've all seen those cases where it seems like a shoe-in, guilty all the way, and then they come back hung on something or a not guilty. I think part of the reason that this was very easy for this jury is Lori's own words, the videos, the body cam videos with the elaborate lies, all the way from Charles to that welfare check that was initiated by Kay and Larry Woodcock. Lies, 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 diabetes to the core. She, to me, is not so far gone, because when you lie, you know you're covering for something that is wrong. I've always said if Lori were that off the rocker, she would have said, yeah, of course, we killed Charles's body, but there was a spirit in it. Yeah, JJ's not in Arizona. He's buried in Chad's backyard with my daughter because they were zombies. We heard none of that, so I have no sympathy for her. But I do see a disconnect with her when you watched her for 6 weeks. And the only time I really saw just solid emotion was when they showed the graphic autopsy photos that day. Her lawyers come in and ask that she be excused. Judge Boyce said, hey, it's the court's discretion and you're staying. And I'm glad he made that choice. I don't know whether they showed her those pictures during lunch to prepare her, but that day when she came back through lunch, I turned to Lauren Matthias and I said, something's up. She's got like a genuine red nose, red face. She's wiping her eyes. And speaking of attorneys, huge shout out to that prosecution. They poured their heart and soul into this case. They broke this down into these little bite-sized pieces with this overwhelming and convoluted case so the jury could get the big picture. We could have laid it all out and been there until the second coming, right? Until Lori and Chad says what was going to happen, because this case is so bulky. And, you know, if you think about it, we really could have been there a lot longer had they chosen to bring in all the other things. And as far as Melanice not testifying, they got their guilty verdict. She wasn't needed for this. But now maybe she's going to testify against Chad if he goes to trial. The other question I get is, do you think Chad Daybell will take it to trial? John Pryor was there pretty much every day of that trial. I saw him most days. So he had a front row seat as to the state's case and how they present it. Some of the facts I think will be slightly different for Chad. We're going to see more of his phone pings, maybe more of his texts. We're going to see the murder charges against Tammy. And I can't think in my head that John Pryor would go to Chad right now and say, yeah, let's take it to court. The biggest reason is because death is still on the table for Chad. It was not for Lori. So I would not be surprised if in a few months, we're not in a hurry. It's over a year away from when they kind of estimate June of 2024 that Chad could go to trial. So I think maybe there's some conversations to be had, and that would be great because that way the family doesn't go through the same set of facts again for the most part. And then they can concentrate on the Arizona cases that involve Kay's brother and Larry's brother-in-law and JJ's father and Tylee's stepdad, who was murdered by Alex Cox as part of a conspiracy with Lori and gosh knows who else. There were a few that knew, you know who I'm talking about. But I think this family needs to be done. And I think that more importantly, I hope that they release the bodies of these children so that they can give them a proper burial and say goodbye. I think that is a weight on their chest. It would be mine. And I know it is. So let's just cross our fingers that the courts let them have the remains of Tylee and JJ. And and have their peace with that. After deliberations started, Larry had his iPad and had the biggest smile on his face, and I'll never forget it. It was a weight, I think, that the trial part was over. There was obvious nervousness all over that room. But, for a few moments, Larry was playing We Will Rock You by Queen and playing the Party's Over song. You guys may have seen that video where JJ's on one of their charter buses and Papa comes in and sings The Party's Over. And JJ gets so excited and giggles. You can hear him giggling in the background. And that video also where Charles surprised JJ at school with Kay and Larry being in town. The love that little boy had for his grandparents and them for him was so obvious, and it's such a loss. It's unfathomable. You look at Tylee and what she went through her whole life. Lori used her as a pawn, and Tylee still loved her mom. I saw these Instagram posts where she said she won the lottery with having Lori as a mom, and it just breaks my heart. When did I hear we had a verdict? I was doing a live hit for Long Crime every hour on the hour at the top. And so about 20 till I would run down and get mic'd up and got word there was a verdict. And so I told them I can't go on, y'all. So I ran up and I actually rode up with a lot of the investigators. They seemed a mixture of nervous, but also sure. Actually, Lindsay Blake was in the elevator as well. And she said, you do your job and you give it to the jury, and that's all you can do. And I want to just remind you guys, Lindsay Blake suddenly lost her dad during this trial. The next day she was there questioning Melanie Gibb, didn't miss a beat. I've talked about it before. This prosecution, I'm going to tell you right now, top notch, 100% for justice. And you know what? It worked. All right. So I want to show some pictures of some very special people, some of which I have met, including Nate Eaton at CrimeCon. So top left, we could start just all these great people that have become friends. And I have to say, so on the bottom left is Will, who was my camera guy down there, my saving grace sometimes. There was one night, y'all, that it all sort of hit me. And this was the day that the graphic autopsy photos were shown. And I just didn't eat. I wasn't hungry. I was way full on coffee. 30 seconds from going live on Cuomo, and I appreciate them being understanding, but I had to rip the mic off and go into a very small little nook in front of the courthouse and get sick just because the stress of that day really, really hit me. I just, guys, you can't even imagine. So here to the left is Matt, who is just amazing. And then we have Justin Lum. And then we have me and Brian Enton, Lauren, and Brian's photog, who I love to death. We had a great time talking. Another one of me and Will down there. And then Nate Eaton, who, guys, Nate and Justin were the two that I followed way before this podcast was ever born. And they were amazing at keeping all of us updated on the latest happenings. All these journalists, all these podcasters, I don't care who you are, the collaboration between everybody spoke volumes to the fact that it wasn't about your platform, how you deliver it, who you're delivering it for. It was all a collaboration for justice for JJ, Tylee, Tammy, and Charles, even though his charges were not included. He was a big, big part of this story. But I have to say, it's just amazing to sit and talk to these amazing human beings. So much respect for how everybody just supported each other there at that trial. It was not a competition. If I missed something, I could lean over and ask any of them, what did I miss? Here's what you missed. It was a collaboration for justice, and that's how it should be. Crime should if you do true crime, it should never be a competition. I don't care about your ratings. You shouldn't care about mine. We all bring this really unique collective summary to the table in our own ways. And we all have different thoughts in how we deliver it. And I'm a huge fan of all these guys. I watch all their content. And there's a million other people that I could just sit here and sing their praises. Um, just we got very lucky with this crew, y'all. You guys had some amazing people there bringing it to you since it was not televised. The courtroom itself, I've said it before, it ran so smoothly. All of the court staff, the bailiffs, our court daddy who gave us all of our rules every day. He was funny. He was sweet. Just a very warm welcome when the circus rolled into town with this one. We felt like we were home in a way. You think about all the delays with the incompetency, 10 months in a mental hospital, and I really had a feeling that this might be the norm for her because we know that Elizabeth Smart's kidnapper, it took years for him to become competent enough to stand trial. And I really kind of thought we were going down that road. If you remember back in November, we had a little scare where her competency came back into question. I thought for sure she'd go back away, but it was very quickly deemed she was competent. And so we definitely are glad for that because this trial went off without a hitch, y'all. So props to Judge Boyce, too. I know people have had their problems with it. I wish it were live streamed, but he was fair. And I think that that courtroom may have been the smoothest trial I've ever sat through. We learned a lot of really, really unpleasant things during this trial. And the Chandler and the Gilbert document dumps and Chad's preliminary hearing gave us a glimpse of what we were facing as far as how they found JJ and how they found Tylee. But I'm going to tell you, it is one of those things that it was so much worse than I ever could have pictured in my head. And I almost don't have words for what they did to JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. To see it on the screen, to see the last moments of this kid's life in your head, and imagine with JJ trying to get this off his head with poor Tylee. How did they kill her? My theory, is pure speculation, is maybe kind of in the same fashion as JJ, is to render her immobile. And what they did to her body, just evil, sadistic. Same with JJ. It's just, how do you do that to children? And then you have Tammy Daybell, the red foam coming out of her mouth, which was a clear indication that something more nefarious happened than her falling out of bed and dying at healthy 49. Lori was convicted for conspiracy to commit murder on that. And so will Chad take it to trial? I'm not so sure he will now. Nobody wants to hear this twice. Nobody wants to see him in there. Nobody wants to hear his excuses. Everything was laid out in this trial enough for me to say, just put them both under the jail. But he deserves a trial. Every person in America does, and I respect that. What does he have to lose? He could have death. Then we learned about the storm, and I could have went my entire life without learning about the storm. But in a way, it fits, not that. But Lori and Chad are like a storm. They're like a big tornado. Two elements come together and create this powerful force that leaves a huge trail of destruction in its path. 4 bodies. I'll always say 5 with Joe Ryan, that poor man. In less than a year, y'all, look at the destruction. We saw things that we hadn't seen, such as the video of her and Chad laying out on Hawaii being served with the order to produce the kids in 5 days. Lori looked inconvenienced. She looked ticked off that they were there. She did not look nervous. Chad looked a little more nervous to me than her, but that's kind of always how we've heard it. Lori is able to spew lies in a very convincing way to law enforcement. Chad just looks at Alex when he's confronted. Let's just kind of run through. In the courtroom, we had a lot of locals who have become very near and dear to me, and they were there faithfully. And we all kind of had our spots by the end. It was sort of like, this is our spot. And so we all got to know each other. And I told you guys about the young lady who looked like Tylee. And I will say it was uncanny in a way. Lori looked at her a lot. I saw Annie Cushing posted that this young lady said that Lori did lock eyes with her right before the verdict was read. It had to have done something to her brain because this beautiful young lady really looked a lot like Tylee. I was amazed that there were 90 plus communications on the day Tammy Daybell was murdered, and none of those were retrieved. And people were way more involved and believed way more than they said on the stand. But I guess it's pretty embarrassing to get up there and say, yeah, I totally believed him when he said I was married to Jesus in another life. 3.5 years they've had to digest everything that's happened, and it doesn't minimize their involvement on the stand. If you've read through the Gilbert documents or the text messages between Lori and Zulema, that I have prior playlists about all the texts. Fruit Loop was reading them with me there for a while. Very interesting to see all the involvement. The one thing I've learned covering trials way back in the day, after I took a break and then now, is this is all very, very evil, evil stuff. But you know what is kind of beautiful about evil things like this is that there's beauty in it. And the friendships that have been formed and the bonds that have been made, most importantly to the family of the victims, the living victims. That is a little bit of silver lining in all the evil. Now, we all wish we didn't know each other's names because that would mean all these beautiful humans would still be with us and it would not be news. But when things like this happen, you do find friendships and bonds that you never would have found otherwise. And I think that that is a testament to the case itself and how people bonded over the tragedy and the atrocity of it. So I just want to acknowledge that. I know that Kay and Larry and Kresha and Annie and all the family have made friendships that will be lifelong now. And if anything good can come out of that, it's a good friend. So it's not always just doom and gloom and evil. It is mostly, but sometimes you have to sort of step back and look at what good came out of it. And I think that a lot of us can say we've made lifelong friends in covering this trial and in just this passion for justice collectively. Testimony was powerful. There wasn't a witness on the stand that didn't have me intrigued, that didn't have that jury intrigued. What they did to those kids, y'all, I don't know if I'll ever understand it. It blows your mind to see the condition of these three people and how they were treated, even in death. It's so sadistic and disrespectful. So, verdict wise, it was intense. We get up in the courtroom and it was supposed to have been read about 12:45. I think it was ended up in read a little bit closer to 1. So I'm sitting here thinking, are they bringing her from the jail? I'd heard she was being kept in the courthouse, kind of down in the bowels of the courthouse where they keep, alleged murderers, now convicted murderers. But I was a little worried maybe something was afoot. But before you know it, the defense comes in, the prosecution comes in, and Judge Boyce takes the bench. The jury's brought in, the alternates are seated. Lori came in she wanted to look a little happy, I think, but it was fake. She was worried, and I don't think she was worried about JJ or Tylee. She was worried about herself and what this jury might find. I heard it came down to the wire, whether or not she was going to testify. I wish she would have. At the same time, we would have sat there for a day or more listening to bull crap. We would have literally heard nothing that resembled the truth. I'm glad she didn't take the stand. I was definitely there for it. But when that guilty verdict was read, I was sitting about 15 feet to the side of her. And it was nothing. It was nothing. Arms crossed, no reaction whatsoever. And that's kind of like Lori. You would see reactions that were not necessarily appropriate for the subject at hand. 1 minute she would look like she was upset. 5 minutes later or 5 seconds later, she's kind of laughing with her attorneys and that kind of thing. I don't know why. I don't know how you could crack a smile at a trial where your two kids were murdered one mutilated, dismembered, and burned, and one buried in 2 garbage bags with a plastic bag over his head. And Tammy Daybell, a mom of 5, a grandmother who, from everybody I've talked to that knew her, said she was an angel on earth. So it defies logic, y'all. And we're not done. Charges in Arizona, 1, perhaps 2. Chad, what's he gonna do? I'm very curious to see. But it was so amazing to sit through from day 1 to watch justice play out in front of her, to be able to see her face, to be able to watch this process take place. The jurors had a tough job of looking at these photos because I can't explain them to you. I can't convey what we saw with these bodies, and we're taking average citizens and asking them to do their civic duty at looking at very, very graphic and just horrifying pictures of 2 children and an adult woman, all of which were innocent and just caught in the path of the Chad and Lori tornado. And I'm proud of this jury. It took, I believe, 6 hours, maybe and some change, to come up with their verdict. It was the right verdict. So we should all be thanking these jurors, the prosecutors, the judge. And I'm going to tell you right now, Lori's defense attorneys, super nice guys. Her investigator, Brandon, really solid dude, very nice. There's a great picture of Larry smiling with them after verdict, and he shook their hands, and he knew they had a job to do. But it was really, I know by default, a lot of people don't like defense attorneys, but we're all due a defense, and that's really important. None of us plan to go kill our kids, but you never know in the future, should you need a defense attorney for something way less, that's your buddy. But these guys were top notch, super, super kind humans and fun to talk to. So I want to acknowledge that as well. They did the best they could for Lori, and Lori did not want Alex and Chad thrown under the bus. Archibald did as much as he could in those closings to shift the blame, because really throughout the trial, the cross exams were not invasive to the degree where, well, Lori was at Hawaii when Tammy died. That was sort of the biggest thing they said. And then in closings, it was more of, well, Lori was a good mom until she met Chad. And that is somewhat true. We know through the custody documents, Tylee was a pawn at a very young age and put through a lot with the allegations Lori made. I talked to Tom Ware, who was guardian to Tylee during that very, very damaging time for her, I'm sure, who said that Lori was diabolical and manipulative, and ultimately they didn't believe anything that came out of her mouth. They felt like Tylee was coached. So this goes way back, but it didn't involve murder. And I don't think you can lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink. Do I think Lori has something wrong? I do. And I don't make fun of that. You know, mental illness is something that is very real. We can't control it. It's just there. But you tell a bunch of lies about where your kids are. You can have mental illness and not be naive as to what's happened, because you don't lie. And I really hope that people don't think that people that are diagnosed with mental illness are Lori Vallows or whatever. It's not that way. And just a lot of emotion, you guys, just a lot of emotion that I feel. And I love Kay and Larry and Kresha, and they're like family to me. And I got to finally meet Annie Cushing and her absolutely stunning, gorgeous daughter, who needs to be on magazine covers. She was so sweet and looked so beautiful every day, as did Annie. These guys have the toughest road ahead because they face every day without their loved ones. And it's not like this was an accident. It would have been just as hard with the loss, but there's something about a brutal murder that adds that element of torture to the living victims. And I hope that they are able to find peace somewhat with this. I did see on Larry's face when he was playing those songs for JJ, that big, big smile of just that's what, that's what he loved. And I think that video of JJ on the bus, or the video of Tylee and JJ on the trampoline, or the video of Tylee hugging JJ saying, "This is my child," because I will always believe Tylee sacrificed herself for JJ. I think Tylee knew her mom was going off the deep end. With that move to Idaho, Tylee knew nobody was gonna take care of that kid as much as she could, and so Tylee will always be a hero in my book, and a beautiful young woman whose own mother allowed this to happen. Tylee, I was thinking about Tylee when I took my daughter to Taylor Swift in the middle of the trial, and there's a video of Tylee singing Love Story with her friend. And I thought to myself, when that song came on, I shouldn't be attending a trial for Tylee Ryan. Tylee Ryan should be in that audience somewhere, singing at the top of her lungs with her friend, having a good time like a young woman, like all the young women, like this girl right here was. And you think about what was lost, and it is a lot. But my thing is this: Charles, Tylee, JJ, and Tammy, they are not the sum of what was done to them. That is not their story. And it's up to family and us to further the legacy of who they were, the beautiful people they were, and not the photos we saw on the screen. That's not their story. And I hope that we do not forget their names. We have to keep those names out there, because maybe something could be avoided. When people see you can't murder your spouses and your kids and think nobody's ever going to want to see them again. That was always what blew me away with JJ and Tylee when we found out they found the bodies. Did they ever stop to think Colby, Annie, Kay and Larry, everybody would not want to see these kids ever again? They didn't care. It was Chad and Lori. They ditched everybody in the end. It was always about them. And I always, up until trial, kind of wondered if it was really power, sex, and money, or was it religious stuff? You know, now more than ever, Rob Wood, Lindsay Blake, Miss Rawlings, the whole prosecution team proved to me this was power, sex, and money, and obstacles that came out of Chad's own mouth. These human beings were obstacles and not treasures in their life. And can we just mention how appropriate that Lori was convicted on Mother's Day weekend? And I hope that day she saw the faces of her babies all day long, because they should be here. You know what? Charles was gone. Okay. She could have divorced him. He could have been alive. She could have said, yeah, take JJ like you did the 50 some odd days I disappeared, because I was really avoiding being served with divorce papers. Because guess what? That would mean no $1 million life insurance policy. You know what, Chad? You wouldn't be the first LDS dude to divorce his wife. And then Kay and Larry, take care of JJ. Tylee, you are 16, almost 17. You can stay in Arizona and we can go do our own little wackadoodle religion all we want. Nobody had to die. And that's why Lori Vallow will spend the rest of her days in a cell, in a prison that's not going to be pretty, because prisons are not this tiny little jail that she's in right now. And I'm going to tell you what, I have a glimpse at life series. For those of you who are new, you can go back through the playlist. This comes from somebody I know who is in prison for life for murder in California. And she has a lot of insight into what Lori's life is going to be in prison. And it is a very enlightening series. And I'm going to tell you right now, women who murder are not popular. And Lori may think she can charm everybody in that prison like she's done her whole life. It ain't going to happen. Her happy days in this tiny little jail are about to be over. So what's next? Well, it could take up to 3 months for sentencing, because they have to do a pre-sentencing investigation. I plan to go back for sentencing. And then, I mean, she's got Arizona. Arizona's waiting. Will she just waive that? No, it's going to be the last plane ride she can take for the rest of her life. It's going to be the last time she can be in Arizona for the rest of her life. I totally see her fighting it, going, whatever. and I'll be there to bring it to you, hopefully. But I just wanted to do this, and it's not really a set episode. It's more of just my ramblings about everything. And I have a million other thoughts, and there may be another verdict episode as things come to me, but justice was served. And the look on her face after every single guilty verdict told the story. By the way, here's her new mugshot. Well, we know how she gets the curls. Kind of looks like a washed up version of Pippi Longstocking to me. Afterwards, we know we had that presser with Kay and Larry, and the crowd was singing "We Will Rock You" when he came out. Very touching. I almost kind of cried over there. I was on air, but it was very moving. The people of Rexburg watched faithfully at their viewing station there, and people came out in mass in Boise to show support. This picture right here of Kay and Rob, y'all, brought me to tears, because I'm going to tell you, that guy right there is a good dude. The entire prosecution, what a team. We owe them a debt of gratitude for closure and a guilty verdict. They did their job. Think about all the hours and the days and the weeks away from their own families for JJ, Tylee, and Tammy, and Charles. Think about what they've sacrificed to make sure this verdict came. We should all be grateful we have prosecutors like them. You guys in Idaho are very lucky that these guys are on your team. But anyways, back to these wonderful humans that I met, and then the listeners, the people that brought gifts and food and just a hug and a picture. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys. Stick with me. We got a lot coming up. A lot of listeners did not have time to really listen to the Letitia Stout trial. That's going to be my next big thing. We're going to condense it a bit. It was a long trial. I'm going to catch up on Koberger. I'm going to catch up on Barry Morphew. He's come out talking. So that's kind of what I'm going to be doing this week. I'll give some odd episodes here and there, but I'm back in mom mode and I'm enjoying it immensely. So only when the kids are at school, I'll be working. And if I get an episode out, I get an episode out. If not, I'm just enjoying my family right now. And I appreciate all you guys that have trusted me to bring you everything that happened in that courtroom. I'm going to do a live for everybody soon, maybe next weekend. I'm not sure. Fruit Loop and I are going to record an episode together where we finish this case out, because we started this the day we saw Nate in the helicopter over the Daybell property, where unfortunately we finally had the answer of where the kids were. So lots in store, lots coming up, all fact driven, no spin here, y'all. There's plenty of places you can go to discuss the rumors, but we're going to keep it fact based. I appreciate all y'all. Stick with me. We're just getting started. We are on the long road to justice on a lot of cases. This one's not over, y'all. So let's take a breather from Vallow, and let's see what happens with Chad, and let's see what happens with Arizona. Until the next time you see me, love all y'all. We'll see you soon.